And then students in the proficiency measures, which is 3B, 3C, and 3D, they're only included in that measure if they're a participant in 3A, the participation measure. Makes sense. And then students can only be reported once in each subject area. So if a student has more than one test, like maybe you have an 8th grader who took 8th grade math, but they also took secondary math 1, we have to apply tiebreakers and only pick one test to submit. And the way our tiebreakers work, we try to favor records that are participants over non-participants. And then if both records are still participants, then we look at the tests and favor the one that has proficiency over non-proficiency if there is difference between the tests. Next file. Okay. So here's where the change comes in. So previously the indicator 3 measures were calculated for grade 4, grade 10, grade 8, and grade 10. Now they're calculated for grade 4, grade 8, and then high school, which means that the grade 9 and 10 data is being combined. Okay, so what does this mean for you? Your special ed staff might request your help with digging into the data. And so I just like to keep you guys appraised with changes to measures like this so that when you're helping your special ed staff, you'll have the information you need in order to provide them high quality data. And then anytime you need more detailed information about EdFacts assessment files or indicator 3, or if you even just want a copy of the student level data that goes into indicator 3 rather than having to figure it out for yourself, just get a hold of myself or Tracy and we can help you out with that. And then just a couple quick resources if you want to if you want to be able to reference them. The EdFacts file specifications, the files that that we submit that has this data. Actually 179 and 189 are science. So 175 and 185 are math, 178 and 188 are language arts. And then for the OSEP indicator data, it's part of the state performance plan annual performance report for part B, which is K-12 special ed under IDEA. That's what all those acronyms mean. This site is where you can read up on what all of the OSEP measures are, indicator measures, and there's probably 6 or 7 of them that are based off of enrollment data, enrollment and outcomes data. Indicator 1 and 2 is your grad rate and dropout rate. Indicator 3 is assessment. Indicator 4 looks at disciplinary removals. Indicator 5 and 6 are least restrictive environment placement of students with disabilities, so where they're actually receiving their services and the bulk of their education. And indicator 9 and 10 look for disproportionate representation of certain disability types as being identified as special ed or as being identified as specific disability types. And yeah, so there's a bunch of measures that that if your staff comes to you asking for help, you'll be able to read the definitions of them in this document. Okay, and I think that's it for me. Any questions anyone has right now, or you're always welcome to email me if questions come up. Okay, on to Tammy then. Thanks.
Hi, so I'm going to talk about summer EBT beginning school year 23-24. That's this school year and beginning this summer. Summer EBT is a new permanent program. It is similar to the pandemic EBT, PBT that we've participated in the last 3 years. will be some differences, but just so you know, this is a new permanent program. The Consolidation Appropriations Act of 2023 authorized this permanent nationwide summer EBT program beginning this summer. There was an interim final rule that was published on December 29th with the regulations. Currently, our office is working to obtain board approval to run this program, and Department of Workforce Services is working to secure. We are required to have a 50% state match for the administrative funds. So we're working on those two pieces before we can implement the program, but we're planning on running this program this summer. Next slide, please. So the purpose of summer EBT is to provide access to nutritious meals during the summer for students and children. The benefits will come in the form of preloaded cards that families can use to purchase groceries at authorized retailers and farmers markets. Beginning in the summer of 2024, families will receive $40 per eligible child for each summer month, and that's a total of $120. That amount will not be prorated, it's always the same amount. Payments are made available to eligible students through an electronic benefit transfer card, EBT card, from Department of Workforce Services. These benefits work together with other available FNS nutrition assistance programs, such as the summer meal sites that we have through our SFSP and Seamless Summer, SNAP, WIC, and WIC to help ensure kids have consistent access to critical nutrition when school is out. So, eligible students for summer EBT. The criteria is, first, the student must have been certified for free or reduced price meals and attended a school that participates in either the National School Breakfast Program or the National School Lunch Program. They had to have attended one of these schools at some point during the school year. Students that are attending a special provision option school, such as schools that are signed up for Provision 2 or CEP, those students have to have a separate determination of eligibility for free or reduced price meals. So with the pandemic EBT program, we were able to provide benefits to all students enrolled in a CEP or Provision 2 school. With the summer EBT program, that's not the case. So we will only be able to provide benefits if a student has the determination of free or reduced price eligibility. And I have an example is if a parent fills out, it's called a Declaration of Household Income form, because if they are enrolled in one of these schools, they're not allowed to use the child nutrition program applications. So they have to use a different form. But the food service directors are familiar with this form. Next slide, please. So what we have planned for this summer, 2024, our office will be collecting spreadsheets of eligible students from all the LEAs. This file is not going to be a snapshot in time, which is what we did last year. Instead, we will need lists of eligible students that at any time during the school year were enrolled and attended schools participating in the National School Lunch Program and had regular access to school meals. So that's going to be the list of students that we're going to need to collect. Students must have been determined eligible for free or reduced price meals at some point during the school year. So that date is, the school year began July 1st, 2023, up until the current time when you submit your file. It's important that you do not include students that had a 30-day carryover eligibility at the beginning of the school year and then were later dropped to paid or full pay status. So those students did not have a free reduced determination this school year because they only had the carryover for the first 30 days. And it's also important that you do not send full rosters of CEP and Provision 2 schools, because you can only include students that are determined income eligible based off of the Declaration of Household Income form or other means. Okay, next slide, please. So, this is our plan for the timeline. It is not set in stone because, like I said, we're still waiting to get board approval, and we're still waiting to secure the required 50% match of the funds. But right now, this is what we're planning. The summer EBT regulations state that the benefit issuance must occur before the summer operational period begins. Now, this year, because this is a brand new program, FNS is going to be a little bit lenient, but we are trying to honor this timeline. We anticipate collecting data spreadsheets mid to late March. That's our hope. Parents will also be able to submit a summer EBT application with the Department of Workforce Services for their children if they are not already eligible for benefits. So that means if your food service director has not given them a free reduced benefit determination this school year. So they've come through direct certification or they have an income application. If none of that is true, but the student is still eligible based off of income, the parent can submit the summer EBT application directly with DWS. And those benefits have to be issued within 15 days from the time the application is, I think it's actually submitted, not just processed. Beginning next year, school year 25, we are looking at ways to automate this process by using either Utrex or USIMS to collect the data from the LEAs. We're still in discussions with Aaron and I don't even know who else, but trying to get that in place for next summer so that we'll look for some changes there, but we're still ironing everything out at this time. Okay, so I believe those are all of my slides. I see a question from Steve asking, why are we doing this as a separate collection when we submit this data through Utrex already? That's a good question, and the problem is there are some data fields that we need that are not currently collected from Utrex. So we need to have a parent guardian name for each student. We also need to have a mailing address for each student. And currently, those fields are not required for all students. In order for us to be able to use the Utrex data, we're going to have to have those fields available. Other fields that will be required for our office for summer EBT are going to be the date that a student became eligible for free reduced meals. That's not currently being collected through Utrex. And the type of eligibility, such as direct certification or income application. So there are some fields that we need that aren't currently in Utrex and aren't currently required in Utrex. Like Cliff said, those fields, some of those fields are optional, but we can't process our data for summer EBT if we don't have those fields. And so, like I said, we're in the process of trying to figure out how to automate this in Utrex USIMS for next summer and beyond. But this summer, we're collecting the data as we did previously for pandemic EBT. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. We'll now have Riley give an update on the SOAR report.
Hi, everyone. You can go to the next slide. So the SOAR reports for counselors are going to be available soon. These are for school years 2021, 2022, and 2023. And these can be accessed via the data gateway within a week or so. They're done, but are in the process of becoming accessible on data gateway. So IT is currently working on that. And the way you get to these is by logging in, going to My Tools, and then clicking SOAR under counseling. and then you select the district and then school, or you can select all schools or all LEA schools report zip file, and that will download the reports for all the schools in your LEA. And so if you can, please keep an eye out for these and then let us know by around mid-February or so if there's any schools that are missing, or if they don't have any updated data, or if things aren't looking right for some of your schools, that would be great. But those will be up, yes, within a week or so.
And just one note on that, for those that need to access it, you do have to have the role assigned in Data Gateway to be able to see that show up under My Tools. So if for some reason the SOAR report does not show as an option under My Tools, it means that you're not assigned the role to be able to view that report. So just another note on that.
Yes, thank you.
All right. We can go on to the next slide then. This is similar to Riley's. I'm just giving an update on the Utrecht's archived reports for October and December. So we can go on to the next slide. So October took a little bit longer, but it is currently up. So if you have not access that, it should be available. So that's for this school year 24. Please also just remember that when possible, it's always just better if you can download your own copy the day that you finalize. The archived reports are just meant to be there in case for some reason you need to access that and weren't able to download those. And then similar, if you go to the next slide, the reports are also available now for December. And that's all I have on that. Thank you. Next slide. Melissa will be talking to us about some updates to the Utrecht specifications. And Stacy had a column as the past year column showing, yeah, we did get that resolved. So that the past year is updated to be correct. All right, Melissa.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the Utrecht specification, and just announce that there's some updates to it. Next slide, please. So, yep, there's some updates coming to the Utrecht specification. So when those are available, it's not updated yet, but when it is available, it will be available on the USBE website. So I've added a link on that slide where you can find that. So I've already submitted a ticket with our website team to get that updated. So I would predict it'll be updated, I would say, within the next 2 weeks. So just know that that's coming, but it's not there yet. As kind of for your information, we have put a system in place where I plan to make updates to the specification in well, it starts in early January, but obviously it takes time. So around this time of year, and then I'm planning to do another set of updates in mid-July before the new school year begins. So that's more just for your information. We're only going to be having those 2 update periods for the specification document itself. So that's the plan right now in terms of when we'll be doing updates. Next slide, please. So although the updated spec itself is not ready yet, I did want to provide the most recent changes list. So I won't go through each one of these, but there's kind of a sneak peek of the most recent changes that have been made to the specification. So I would say if you're looking at some of these and have questions, please hold your questions until we get to the next couple of speakers, because the folks speaking after me today are going through most of these major changes. So your questions may get answered in the next few minutes here as we go through the next couple of folks. We're going to speak on most of these, so just hold tight if you have questions. Obviously, if we get through those and you still have questions, let us know. Next slide. So one thing I've been asked just to highlight is something that was kind of already added previously, but we want to just make sure everybody's aware that it's now active and ready to use. So we added a new field in the Youth and Care record, or the S3 record, for residential treatment center. So that is now added and active in UTrex. So that was added so we could now start collecting that data, but it's only useful if LEAs start using it to report. So just an announcement that that's ready to use, and please use it when it's applicable to the situation. All right, so I think that's all I had. Looks like Callista will speak on some district of residence validation changes we have going on.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. And Melissa, just for your awareness, in the chat, there was a question about, will an email be sent out when those are done? And I just answered that I can work with you and make sure that we notify them when those are complete and up on the website.
Yeah, that's true. We can definitely make a note and just contact you personally if you really want to know right when it's ready. Otherwise, I would say just check in like a week or so and it should be ready. Those are the options right now.
Okay, thank you. We can go to the next slide, please. So I'm just giving an update. These validation changes have been announced in previous meetings, but I wanted to just do a review and an update so you know what's coming. So these are all related to the district of residence field. The first validation on the student record is S1.368. Currently, this is a required field, but only for charters. And so, as has been announced previously, the change will be that it will be required for all LEAs. And it's not currently in production. I know we had a couple times in the past few months where it went out, and so districts saw a bunch of errors, but that was by mistake, and so it will not be a fatal error for districts until next school year, so after July. We do want it to be triggering though by year end for everybody, but it will only be a warning. For charters, it stays the same. It's still an error, and this specific validation is just that it has to be present. It can't be blank. So again, for districts and everyone besides charters, it will be triggering soon. The UTrex team is currently working on it. So we're hoping it will be out in production in the next month or so, but it should only be a warning. Charters, it will still be an error. And then after July, when UTrex rolls over, it will be an error for everybody. All right, next slide. This one is similar to the last one. This is if you did put in a district of residence in that field, it has to be a valid value. So it's the exact same as the last one, where currently and in the past, it's always been required for charters, and that is still the case, and it will still be an error if you enter an invalid value for charters. For everybody else, it will be put into production in the next month or so. However, it will only be a warning for districts through year end. And then next year, it becomes an error for everybody. All right, next slide. And then this is the level 2 validation for district of residence. Currently, this is a warning and it's only for charters. The change will be that it will be required for everyone, not just charters. But this year, so starting in the next month through year end, it will still remain a warning for everybody. But next year is when we will turn that to an error for everybody. Next slide. This is related to the district of residence level 2 warning, but it's on address. And so it's the exact same as the last slide, where currently this is a warning for charters only. The change is that it will be required for everyone, but the rest of this school year, it will still stay as a warning. Districts will just start to see those warnings. And then next year, it will become an error for everybody. Next slide. And I did just want to give a note on that level 2 district of residence warning. It may be that no one has even noticed this, but in working through some of these validations, we discovered that only the level 2 district of residence, when it's invalid, it's not displaying. And so even if a charter currently had those warnings, they wouldn't know because there's nowhere where that's showing up on the overview. So again, no one may have even noticed this, but we are going to be fixing that. So charters will start seeing those where they haven't in the past. And then when we add the validation on all LEAs, it should be displaying and triggering for everyone prior to the year-end submission. Okay, are there any questions on this?
Callista,
Yes.
if a student's attending a charter and your district, isn't your district the district of residence?
So it depends on where they live. That it's based on the permanent address of the student. So yes, if they live in that district, then that is the district of residence. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right, and you can always reach out to me if you think of any other questions. But yep. All right, we will go ahead and move on then if there's no other questions on that too. I'm not sure if it's going to be Willie or Win, giving us some updates on incident data and discipline data.
It's Win. We'll take the next slide, please. Thanks, Callista. And I'm going to tell you about some new infraction type fields and some language updates. I'll take the next slide, please. All right, so these are relatively small, but also noteworthy updates to the Utrecht specs for 2 infraction codes. You can see the text in red there will be added to this new round of Utrecht specs. So robbery will be robbery or theft. Apparently there's an important distinction between those two, and at this point we are grouping them together. Next slide. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but I want to make clear that this addition has been made to these law enforcement fields. Last year was the first year we collected data on these law enforcement fields, and it's come to our attention as we've looked closely at the data that we received that we needed to further specify that these things are happening on school grounds while school is in session or during a school-sponsored activity. I believe this came up with an example in which students were truant, and while they were truant, they were arrested for some other offense. So if that other offense happens off-site while they're truant, that would not be counted as it within any of these law enforcement fields because it didn't happen on school grounds while school's in session or during a school-sponsored activity. Thanks. Next slide. This is an important one. Cyberbullying and hazing have been added. So previously, these were included as part of bullying. Now we're looking to make further distinction between those in response to some legislation. So there are 2 new infraction types. We'll go from having 21 to 23. Now bullying is being broken out 3 ways. Bullying will remain, and then 2 additional ones, cyberbullying and hazing. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, this is an important note. Please be careful about the infraction type called other. We're getting quite a few things written into other for which there are actual infraction types. It looks like in school year 23, there were at least 4,800 of those cases. So other should only be used when no infraction type is available to accurately represent the incident. All right, next slide, please. Here's an example of some of the data we received in the other column that should have been allocated to other Utrecht codes. Thanks. Next slide, please. All right, Cliff, it's all you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So I'll be going through some similar detail about the new youth and care fields. Go to the next slide. So first off, we've got the custody type field that we're adding that new value. As discussed, as shown there in red, this is an addition to. So this is the same thing that you'll see out on the clearinghouse specification. This screenshot here, where that's the Division of Human and Health Services custody type now being available. Go to the next screen. And we've got the Department of Juvenile Justice's facility changes to valid values. I won't read through each of these, but we have had some coming and some going. So in the removing, we've got those 4 that are no longer going to be valid facilities for this. And then that we've added the new additional 6 there. So please refer back to this after you get this back if you need to see that, or it'll be on the clearinghouse specification here shortly. I'll go ahead to the next screen. And calling out some of the specific validations that we have. So the S3, so again, still the youth and care, the 716 and 717, these are both non-loading errors, and that these, as it says here, is only for youth and care records with the DJJS custody type and a C time code are allowed to specify the DJJS facility. And then we've got specifically how those errors are going to look for you, and the parts where we have column data, column name, that's because we're being a little bit transparent on our populating this data in there for you. So obviously column data, it's going to be reaching out to the response that you gave for that, and the column name is going to be pointing to, in this instance, the DJJS facility. So just as a quick note there, if technically you're walking through this and you're seeing those areas, just try to look to see where you're referencing it from. And if you do have any further questions, on that, always feel free to reach out to us and get some clarity on it. We do have these 2 errors each broken out differently so that you can get a different error for each different situation that we're detecting this on, if it's based off of the time C or if it's based off of the custody type. Sorry, I think I said the column was the DJJS facility. The column is specifically the custody type. Go ahead to the next screen. Then on the residential treatment centers, which is optional for the time code C for the youth care students, we've got quite a list of different codes here now available. Each one, as you can see, indicating out to the district itself with its own unique code. I'll go to the next screen. And this one here, we've got to be determined. We haven't given it a number yet. This is one that we're still currently working on pushing out. The rest has already been produced and published out to production. But this one is in progress and soon to receive a number. We'll share that probably at the next meeting. The error that we have here again is for the residential treatment center, that the youth and care records with the C time code are allowed to specify the residential treatment center. So, you know, we're still working on some of the exact verbiage that we're going to send back to that, but just making sure that that part is clear of what this error is going to be intending to show you and help catch for you to make sure the data is accurate. And I think that that was the last one. Any questions on any of those technical areas I just went through? Well, if any do come up, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Cliff. And then lastly, we'll have Nicole Sanchez filling in for Katie Chalice to give us some recent legislative updates.
Hi. So there's only 2 updates that were listed in the agenda, but Katie asked me to add several more. So I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or ask at the end. Can we go to that first one? The next slide. Thank you. So this is SB 98. This is about online data security and privacy. It received a favorable recommendation from the Senate committee, and the bill amends provisions related to cybersecurity breach notification requirements and authorized domain name extensions. A lot of it has to do with the Cybersecurity Center. Can you go to the next one? So important things to note is that now when a person reports a breach to the Utah Cyber Center, they have to include those points: the date the breach occurred, the date it was discovered, the number of people affected, the type of PII involved, and a description of the breach. The same is true when a governmental entity reports. They also have to include the path or means by which access was gained if it's known, the individual or entity that perpetrated the breach if known, and it should be known that information submitted is considered protected and cannot be disclosed. Next one. And then there's one other section there that talks about all government entities to use either .gov, .edu, or .mil. And there are cases where government entities are prohibited from using these domains, including school districts and schools that are not institutes of higher education. In those cases, those entities are exempt from that requirement. If that prohibition changes, the school district or school would have 15 months to update their domain. And then the next one. This is HB 84 school safety amendments. This is a pretty big bill, so I'm just going to focus on the stuff that's specific to data. Firstly, state employees must report if they have any knowledge of circumstances that might lead to a threat or if they know of an actual threat. And the University Neuropsychiatric Institute has to report services they provide through SafeUT to the State Bureau of Investigations databases. Next. Thanks. Some other things that are important to note: the state board has to include the following data in the parent portal. The school level safety data would include data points reflected in that bill. There's quite a lot of them, or not in that bill, in that code, sorry. And they also need to include a link to the public safety portal. And LEAs have to ensure that security cameras within a school building are accessible by law enforcement agencies. Next. And then this is similar, but this is a public safety amendments, HB 86. So one thing that's important to note is that it would rename the criminal and juvenile justice databases to the public safety portal. Next. And then it does clarify some items about the state school board's annual report. It would remove arrests of a minor and other law enforcement activities, but would add school disciplinary action and law enforcement action. And then information that has to be listed separately for each LEA would need to include clarifying law enforcement action rather than activity, and clarifying school disciplinary actions, and then again would remove the arrest of a minor. Good question. These are bills that are currently being considered by the legislature. And then this bill also adds school disciplinary and law enforcement action report to the public safety portal, and would allow the State Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice to enter into contracts to assist them in complying with reporting requirements. Next. So this is HB 172. This is the Immigrant Student Athlete Participation Amendment. This bill would provide an alternate means for collecting information about a student's birth and sex if they are an immigrant or homeless and they might not have the documentation necessary. Next. So specifically, the bill would allow for these documents to be used in place of a birth certificate. So they could use an affidavit from the parent, a religious, hospital, or physician certificate, verified school records, immunization records, or documentation from a social service provider. And the same documentation could be used for a child who is homeless, as long as the parents can provide an affidavit that they don't meet the criteria above and that they're not citizens of the United States. Next. This is HB 182 student survey amendments. There's quite a lot of pieces to this, but this bill would remove the connection between the SHARP data and certain grant funding. And then the new things it would require would be, LEAs would be required to add a policy requiring prior written parental consent when administering surveys. And part of that would be requiring written parental consent at the time of registration for surveys related to an early warning system, surveys that include social emotional learning questions, and the school climate survey. Next. It would also prohibit LEAs from using parental consent obtained at a different LEA, for example, if a student transferred, and it would prohibit LEAs from providing incentives, rewards, or consequences if a student chooses not to participate. And then at the time they're collecting consent, the LEA would have to provide the survey, the intended purpose and use of the data collected, the intended consequences, and the types of persons or entities that might receive the data and the record series in connection to it. And then it would also allow LEAs to opt into using the model school climate survey. And yeah, that's probably a more accurate thing to say, bills that are being considered. This is HB 247, the SOEP statewide online education program amendments. This one would require the State Board of Education to ensure that their information management system allows for the transfer of a transcript, IEP, or 504 between different LEAs, SISs, between an authorized course provider and an LEA, and they would need to ensure that the transfer capability is available for the same use within the operating system the State Board uses for the SOEP. Next. And then the bill would require the State Board to coordinate to offer an online concurrent enrollment program, provide recommendations about funding structures for that program, and allow a student to be enrolled through multiple LEAs for access to an online program. And then additionally, the State Board would need to provide SOEP counselors who could advise students provide training, provide technical support, assist in gathering information, reports, and data, and LEA requests, and direct students to LEA specific counselors. Next. And then if the bill were to pass, if a student had an IEP or 504, the LEA would have to forward that plan to the authorized online course provider and ensure that a copy is provided when revisions are made. The state board would need to create a model cooperative agreement between a primary LEA and an authorized online provider. The authorized online course providers would need to have an SIS that's compatible with the state board. And the state board would need to create a training for LEAs that would include program requirements for a primary LEA, which would include reporting requirements and methods, amongst a lot of other things. Next. And then last, the state board would need to create a communication dashboard that would include a counselor contact list, progress monitoring fields that could be visible by the LEA, the counselor, and the parent. They would need to include grade reporting and ability to flag a student at risk of failing and other relevant capabilities. Next. And then I wanted to just give a little bit of information about how you can provide feedback on any of these bills. Generally speaking, legislators do like to receive feedback. If you have ideas, the first thing you should probably do is check with your superintendent to find out if your LEA already has a policy in place on how to provide that feedback. A lot of times how that would work is you would talk with your superintendent. The superintendent would share it with the Utah School Superintendent Association, and they would share it with the sponsor of the bill. You could also just provide feedback to us directly, the staff at USBE, but our main job is to coordinate with the board, not with the legislature. So don't rely on us. And then finally, you could also reach out to your business administrator. And that's all I have. If there are questions, feel free to put them in the chat or whatever.
Thank you, Nicole. Feel free if anyone has any questions about anything to jump in with those. I do also just want to remind everyone before they leave that we do not have a LEA data meeting in February, so we will not be meeting again until the end of March. So just keep that in mind. You can always email us if you have questions or things that you want to get answered before then, but just know that our next group meeting will not be till March. It looks like we have a hand up. If you wanted to go ahead and jump on. Oh, Eric.
Yeah, this is Eric from Canyons District. I just have a question on the data gateway. When you're looking up an individual student, should other LEAs be able to see all data that is on that student? For example, should they see all the discipline data for that student? And then maybe even beyond that, free reduced lunch status for that student? We just had a few things that have come up over the last week where another LEA, I believe it was a charter school, wanted some more details about an incident to determine if they should accept that student at their school. I know we just thought it was a little interesting that they're using the student lookup to see that, and I was kind of surprised that outside of our LEA they could see our student data like that.
Okay. Yeah, I know that you can see all the enrollment records. I didn't know it. I guess that makes sense that it goes down to that level on those enrollments. Cliff, did you want to respond to anything about that?
I do. So it's also going to depend a lot on who it is at the LEA, what their position is. Our LEA admins, it is the intent that they can see any of the other districts. Their role and purpose is to be able to help facilitate LEA to LEA situations. So it's very important that we have at that level that crossability. We do have the different layers though built into our responsibilities. So I'd be very much interested in going through with you who that person was that you maybe had some concern with, taking a look at if they're set up at the school level to only be able to use that at their school or just at their district. Because we do have some of those different filters in there to try to narrow that down. And if there are any concerns, you know, definitely need to get some use case examples to try to poke at.
Okay, I'll
Emily's
reach.
also got some comments.
Okay, I'll let her go.
Yeah, that question sounded to me more like a policy question than are they actually technically able to do that? Technically, yes, as Cliff said, if under certain roles, which are very limited. But the policy question, like if you think that, I think the example you gave sounds concerning. Like that would come to, is there a policy that an LEA can choose whether or not to allow a student in based on their disciplinary record? And I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but I know there is Utah code that addresses students who were expelled and whether or not they can re-enroll either in the school that they were expelled from or in a different school. So you might look for that policy if that's part of what's going on with this particular student. And outside of that, if it seems really concerning, I would recommend bringing this up with our superintendency and have them review whether this is something that isn't okay from a policy standpoint, and then later on down the road might lead to incident data not being available on the data gateway, for example, or other decisions that end up being made when a policy question comes up.
For sure. And I kind of get that. I mean, that was the example. I think what's probably maybe triggered us more, I don't know, trigger is probably not the right word, but was the free reduced, economic status for that student. I mean, it's pretty protected status. And in our SIS, we have a handful of people in our entire district that can see a student's status where, again, I haven't explored this further, and maybe different people's rights are different. That's maybe where this question is coming from as far as from another LEA, but I can probably go out and look up any student in the state and see what their economic status is. And to me, I don't feel that is accurate and correct, that I should be able to look up any student in the state of Utah and see if they're on free or reduced lunch. I mean, in my district is one thing because I'm handling that data, but should I have access to the entire state of Utah and what everybody's economic status is? I don't think so. But again, I just thought it was interesting that I could see so much data from other LEAs, and I just didn't know if that was how it was designed, if that's just an oversight or what's being out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a really good possibility that a lot of this data was just built into the data gateway without putting a whole lot of thought of does it belong there. So when you bring up questions and use cases like this to the right people, that's it's very helpful. Thank you.
Eric, can you just confirm what your role is at your LEA?
LEA admin.
Okay. Thank you.
For sure.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that there's more discussion that should probably be had about this.
Yeah, and I'm happy to reach out or set up a time outside of this. I was just more We found out about it yesterday or the day before, so I figured it would be a good time to bring it up.
Thanks, Eric. It sounds like, yeah, we'll be having some discussions about that. And we'll definitely be in touch if we have any further information on it to give you. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? If not, you can always send those in to us by email or calling. We will be sending all of the slides and meeting notes out from today, as well as the recording. And again, we will not plan on meeting again like this till the end of March. So thank you, and hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you.